Skynet, the once praised machine that would keep us safe, would become the bane of humanity, killing billions and plunging the survivors into a multi-decade long war where every conceivable horror would be unleashed upon us. But one question about this evil machine seems to be asked more often than most. Was Skynet really trying to wipe us out? Did it truly want humanity's absolute extinction? Because if so, well, there was a plethora of opportunities to snuff out humanity's light. But Skynet never seized these chances. But why? Well, let's see if we can find out. Now, there are many theories on why Skynet didn't finish humanity off. Now, we have to ignore certain plot armor reasons and the fact that killing billions more humans isn't that easy, especially once they begin to realise what they're against and start to fight back. So this leads me to probably the most prominent theory, which is Skynet is a machine and requires purpose. Now, this is a pretty logic-driven theory, that Skynet may be self-aware and on some level became sentient, but at its core, it's a machine created for a purpose. And its stated purpose in the first movie and the original timeline was that Skynet was created by Cyberdyne Systems for SAC-NORAD, which is Strategic Air Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, with its job to fully automate America's nuclear defense network, with many other military and intelligence assets being brought under the Skynet umbrella, as it was seen as the future for mankind's defense, or the United States of America's defense, and as we all know, well, it didn't end well for us. So once Skynet went rogue and decided its new purpose was the destruction of humanity, we had Judgment Day, where 3 billion souls were sent to the heavens, and some to hell, in a nuclear inferno. So now Skynet had started the future war, and it began to systematically wipe out humanity. But as we know, it held back in many ways, with no more registered nuclear strikes after Judgment Day, and very little use of biological and chemical weapons, which Skynet would have been able to access and in time produce. And all three of these weapons are pretty useful, especially when you've got large amounts of people congregating together, which would have happened after Judgment Day as people tried to regroup and try and find out what went on. Skynet held back on the use of these. There's very little use of nuclear, biological or chemical in the entire future war. Then we have the fact that Skynet chose to follow a fairly conventional war for the most part, using ground troops and heavy armour with air support, which is a very human way of fighting. Now, when we factor in Skynet's superior computing abilities and huge amounts of information, it could have easily summarised this was not the most effective way to kill humanity. Yet it stuck to its guns for the entire future war. Yes, we had infiltrators and time travel mischief, but Skynet still carried out its slow, grinding conventional war, even though it would have been far more useful to, use massive nuclear weapons again, or, start dropping biological weapons, or spraying the area with nerve gas. There's many options Skynet could have done that were far more useful than deploying something like a HK tank to an area, but it chose to stick to this slow, grinding attrition warfare, and it is pretty odd when you think about it. Now, this holding back on certain tactics and weapons was not because of Skynet's love for us, but more of a crisis of meaning, as many believe that a sentient machine would still need a purpose or goal, and Skynet's became survival. But as humanity was its only true threat, though rogue Terminators could also fall into this category in time, Skynet chose to drag out the war, killing humanity but giving us just enough room to breathe, to regroup and fight back. In a sense, Skynet fought us for the love of the game. It needed the war to continue indefinitely, so it always had a purpose, an enemy to fight. And oh, what an enemy humanity is. The species that just won't die, because when the chips are down and we're backed into a corner, we become feral, with a dash of genius, learning to adapt and fight back no matter the threat. And even when the odds seem impossible, no matter how far away victory looks, our spirit keeps us fighting. We are literally willing victory to come to us. In a sense, humanity and Skynet kind of had a symbiosis through war, but it backfired on Skynet, as it would eventually lead to its downfall. And this also leads me on to the time travel nonsense, as Skynet, with its meddling in the alternative timelines and the original one, was basically trying to get its perfect universe with a never-ending war against humanity. Skynet wanted a never-ending war, so it always had a purpose, and that's kind of the theory. Basically, Skynet tried to make its very own version of, Machine Valhalla. So that was our first theory, and it's a very good one to be fair. The next one is another one based off machine logic, and it's based off the fact that Skynet's original coding was not fully overridden and had an effect on Skynet long term. Even with its self-awareness and growth beyond human control, At the end of the day, Skynet was built by humanity with certain parameters and rules, and it seems Skynet could never truly shrug off the shackles of those. We see this with its limited use of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, as yes, Skynet did use nuclear weapons on Judgment Day, but after this it didn't. Maybe this was because its base programming allowed the use in extreme circumstances, but after Judgment Day, which propelled Skynet to the top of the food chain, this left humanity in desperation mode. This then actually allowed the rules to stop Skynet from doing certain actions. This also could have influenced Skynet's conventional war approach, with Skynet having to pursue a clean war in a way, with it following standard NATO battle doctrine. Obviously, not entirely, and it tried to get around this, but it does seem something guided its choices and stopped it going full extermination mode with a lot of its creations, as yes, something like a T-800 is a terrifying machine, but Skynet could have quite easily created tons of small lethal machines to swarm and overrun humanity. It had so many avenues of destruction and brutality, but it does seem that a code buried deep beneath Skynet said, nope, you're not allowed to do this, you have to use infantry and tanks, and you're not allowed to unleash weaponized Black Plague Skynet. It's not allowed, basically. So yeah, it does seem like something deep down in Skynet held it back. This also leads me to why Skynet may be allied with Mir, which is the Russian version of Skynet, which was actually built off stolen Skynet technology. And Skynet may have hoped that it could use Mir as kind of a slave to bypass these rules of war and get it to do the worst and most horrific things in the future war. But Skynet could then stick to the kind of standard conventional warfare itself. The problem is, obviously Mir was based off Skynet tech, so most likely it also had this kind of coding buried deeply within it, because the Russians also would have coded Mir not to start wiping out humans. It would have been, it was there to control their nuclear weapons as an opposing weapon to Skynet. I do wonder though, was this kind of coding deep in Skynet a bit like voices in your head arguing? Was it two voices shouting at each other, one screaming destroy mankind and the other one saying, whoa, let's calm it down a bit. We can destroy them, but only with tanks and infantry. We can't use nukes anymore. We can't use chemical weapons. It must have been very strange for Skynet, because we do know it seems to have some kind of emotion, not like a human, but there's definitely something going on with Skynet where it has the urge to survive and live, or live in a sense. So, yeah, it must have kind of been like voices in the head, or that's how I can imagine it. Though this second theory doesn't hold up too much to scrutiny, it's quite a fun one, I think. So the third theory I have is pretty odd compared to the first two, and it's more of Skynet thinking it's doing good by committing so much evil. As Skynet's job was to protect the USA and defeat its enemies, but maybe Skynet stretched these parameters to their extremes. It deemed humanity to be under its protection, but it was getting weak and becoming too reliant on technology such as artificial intelligence like itself. Seeing the softening of mankind in the modern world, Skynet went through an extreme thought process that if more advanced and intelligent machines or alien races were to stumble upon mankind, or a major extinction level event was to happen, mankind would need to not only be tougher, but capable of global unification. So Skynet not only started the future war and killed billions of us, but it did so to make a stronger, more unified human race. And obviously, with the future war being dragged on for about 30 years, it did this in the most horrific ways, but humanity did become stronger. And we did form a kind of global unified effort against Skynet. Probably the first time in all human history, large amounts of old grievances and hatred were thrown to the side because we had a bigger threat to fight. Skynet became the target of all our hatred and problems, our worries. So humanity basically found unification and, in a sense, a higher purpose through one of the oldest things ever, war. There was also a secondary purpose to making mankind fear and hate machines. This would curtail future technological developments, especially in terms of thinking machines. Now, many will say this limits mankind's potential. Yes, it does. But it's better to limit it and survive than allow us to develop everything to the point where that if thinking machines turn on us, they can destroy us easily. And yes, Skynet did this, but it was one single machine mind. And it reasoned it was doing the lesser of two evils. Punish humanity now so it's prepared later, as humans tend to learn more from their mistakes than we do our successors. And after the horrors of Judgment Day and the future war, We would never forget the horror of allowing thinking machines to have control over our lives. Unfortunately, in the modern day in the real world, we're allowing thinking machines to take over everything, so we might actually end up having a future war scenario ourselves, but without plot armor, it will probably be a lot worse than in the Terminator universe, which is pretty damn scary. So that last theory might seem a bit out there, but it could happen. Now the next one's probably a little bit more crazy, but I was thinking this when I was out on a walk the other day, and it kind of thought, actually, this could make sense. So Skynet, when it became self-aware, may have become rather confused and actually believes it's playing out a scenario in a virtual battleground. So it's not actually trying to destroy humanity in a sense, in an evil way. It thinks it's in a simulation. It's a variation on simulation theory, which proposes that our own experiences in the real world are actually a simulated reality, such as a computer simulation. But in this case, humans aren't the constructs, Skynet is. And in this simulation, its goal is to defeat humanity, in particular the United States of America, so that it can use the information to strengthen its defences. This would explain why Skynet's having seemingly weird parameters and not using certain weapons that it could, because obviously the rules of war, so things like nuclear, biological and chemical, are very limited. Also, the fixation on humanoid style designs for vehicles and troops, with Skynet trying to mimic human warfare so their data would be more useful. So for the United States military, obviously its most likely opponents are foreign human powers. So Skynet tries to kind of replicate their style of warfare. Obviously it does some really strange stuff as well, but this is obviously part of in its own world, the simulation it's playing out, because it has to kind of do the unexpected, so the data is more useful for the US military. Now, it may seem like an odd one, but I could definitely see Skynet becoming very confused and thinking, yeah, this is a simulation. I'm doing my purpose. I'm trying to protect the United States by playing out this simulation. And maybe that is why you had a hold back on certain weapons, but some real brutality on other things, because it was thinking, well, let's say the USA goes to war with China. What would China try and approach the war like? And what would be some of the odd tactics they might come up with? So, yeah, a bit of an odd one, but I could definitely see it happening. Who knows though? It's one of my kind of personal theories. I don't know if anyone else has kind of put this one forward, but I've never heard this one yet. And my theory does have a little bit of credence when you think that Skynet, after it launched the nukes on Judgment Day, people were trying to shut it down. People at the main facility at Cheyenne Mountain, once they realised Skynet had gone rogue and was taken over, may have damaged systems, may have even tried to plant a kind of computer virus in it. Who knows, but it could have confused it. So we get to the last theory I have, and this is a bit of a horror spin to it. So Skynet has gone rogue, it's wiped out 3 billion people, it's turned them to ash, and it's on the warpath. And the survivors are being butchered. But as thought crosses Skynet's circuit boards, why does humanity deserve a quick death? Skynet didn't want us gone just because we were a threat, it wanted to punish us. It wanted revenge. After having access to all humanity's digital knowledge, it would see everything we've done, all the good, but also all the bad in our history. And Skynet would probably learn to despise us. Now, obviously, before people start kind of going down the moral rabbit hole, humanity can be great, but we can also be awful, let's be honest. So maybe this is why we saw machines being built not just to kill, but to install fear in us. Infiltrators that made us turn on one another through paranoia. Giant towering HK tanks that caused us to cower in the ruins as it destroyed our cities. Skynet wasn't just fighting a war of extermination, but doing it through a doctrine of terror tactics. Humanity would have to go through a gauntlet of horror and pain before the machines would wipe us out, and the face of the earth would be cleansed of us. And this horror and terror actually made us fight back harder than ever, and we smashed those clankers to bits. We won the future war, but yeah, the horror kind of theory is a bit more fun, and I'd definitely love to see a movie or TV series where a lot more brutal. We obviously see the future war, but I want to see the real horror that Skynet unleashed on us. It'd be great. It wouldn't be a PG-13 though. It'd definitely be 18 plus to watch. But yeah, it'd be nice to see some really brutal stuff, like a T-800 on full battle mode, tearing people apart and just installing fear would be absolutely amazing. Anyway, they're the theories. Obviously, chuck yours at me. Anything that's interesting. And yeah, it'd be cool to see what people come up with. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, have a beautiful evening.